we're going to start our Chapter 10, Section 8 review video, and the learning target for today is to find the roots of monomials, the roots of monomials. So let's get a vocabulary word here. Vocabulary is something called a cube root. Well, a cube root is a number that can be raised to the third power to create another number. For example, if I had 27, and I wanted to take the cube root, I put the little 3 there to indicate it's the cube root of 27. Well, 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 would be 27. So 3 is the cube root of 27, because 3 cubed is equal to 27. All right? So for any numbers a and b, where a is greater than 0 and b is greater than or equal to 0, the root of the product AB is equal to the product of each square. So if I take the square root of 9 times 16, it's the same as saying the square root of 9 times the square root of 16. Or the square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of 16 is 4, so the answer would be 12. Okay, so let's do a couple of these here. The square root of 9k to the 4th, so that'd be the square root of 9 times the square root of k to the 4th. Square root of 9 is 3. The square root of k to the 4th, well, k to the 4th can be written as k squared times k squared. So the square root of k to the 4th is k squared, so it'd be 3 times k squared. 16e squared, so 16, the square root of 16, times the square root of e squared. The square root of 16 would be 4, and the square root of e squared would be the absolute value of e. It would always be positive. If I square something and then take the square root, if I square something and then take the square root, I always end up with a positive value, and that, of course, you remember was absolute value. All right, 400w to the 8th x squared. Well, I'm going to make that as the square root of 400 times the square root of w to the 8th times the square root of x squared. Well, 400, the square root of 400 is 20, because 20 times 20 is 400. The square root of w to the 8th would be w to the 4th, and since this is an even number here, I don't have to worry about the sign. It's always going to be positive. And then the square root of x squared would be the absolute value of x. Right. And let's look at this last one here. The square root of 81, a to the 4th, b squared. So it'd be the square root of 81 times the square root of a to the 4th times the square root of b squared. Well, square root of 81, 9. 9 times 9 is 81. Square root of a to the 4th is a squared. Let me write these a little bit clearer so that they're easier to read. 9, and then a squared. And then the square root of b squared is b, but it's the absolute value of b, because squaring something makes it positive, taking the square root makes it positive, so I must take the absolute value of b. So even if I plugged in a negative value for b, we would always get a positive answer. For any numbers a and b, the cube root is a product of ab is equal to the product of each cube root. So just like we did with square root, the cube root of 216, well, 8 times 27 is 216. So the cube root of 8 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. And the cube root of 27 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. All right, so let's go through some of those. I've got the cube root of a to the 6th. I'm going to break down a to the 6th as a squared times a squared times a squared. 2 plus 2 plus 2 would be a to the 6th. And so the cube root of a to the 6th is a squared. A squared. All right. Simplify the cube root of y to the 12th. Well, as I look at this, I'm going to break y to the 12th up into y to the 4th. And I'm going to do that 3 times. Y to the 4th times y to the 4th times y to the 4th. And I would end up with y to the 4th is equal to the cube root of y to the 12th. Y to the 12th. Okay? Simplify 343, the cube root of 343 m squared, or m to the 12th. Well, that's the cube root of 343 times the cube root of m to the 12th. Well, let's do m to the 12th first. M to the 12th would be m to the 4th. That's m to the 4th. 343, I'm going to turn to my calculator and I'm going to see what the cube root of 343 is. And so I type in 343 and I take the cube root of it and I get, I hit the wrong key here, 343, and I take the cube root and I get 7. 7 times 7 times 7 is 343. So it'd be 7m to the 4th. 7m to the 4th. Okay? The cube root of 512h to the 3rd, that's the cube root of 512 times the cube root of h to the 3rd. The cube root of 512 is 8. And the cube root of h to the 3rd is h. 8h. Find the length of one side of a cube whose volume is 729 g to the 18th. So I want to take the cube root of it, cube root of 729 g to the 18th. Well, if I do, that's the cube root of 729 times the cube root of g to the 18th. Cube root of g to the 18th, if I divide 3 into 18, I get 6, so it's g to the 6th. And the cube root of 729 on my calculator, I get 9. So it'll be 9g to the 6th. Express the length of a side of a cube whose volume is 216x to the 5th. So I want to take the cube root of 216x to the 15th, sorry. So it's the cube root of 216 times the cube root of x to the 15th. 15 divided by 3 becomes x to the 5th. X to the 5th. And 216 cube root is 6. 6x to the 5. 6x to the 5. Okay?